Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll give it a few more minutes like the last couple of sessions. So if you want to go and grab yourselves a bottle of water, go to the toilet, grab yourself a coffee, we'll start in approximately 1 or 2 minutes. For the premise of this webinar today, just if you're not going to get a drink or anything like that, start thinking of the types of questions that you haven't been able to get answered, or if you want some insight into anything so that we can start to prepare our answers, so we're not caught off guard. But hopefully we should know everything, shouldn't we, Sophie?
Fingers crossed, yeah.
I'm pretty confident, yeah.
But who really knows everything about what Microsoft are doing at any given point?
And I was going to say, I think Microsoft changes its mind as much as I have a shower every week. So that's every day, by the way, if anyone wants to.
I was going to say once a
Every
week.
single day, there's something new from Microsoft. So, but yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start about 11:03. So we'll start in about 30 seconds, everyone. So again, grab yourselves a drink if you want, and we'll get started in a second. Start thinking of the types of questions you want to raise. We can take some people off mute if some of your questions are quite long. So again, at certain stages throughout the webinar, we can maybe get you to raise your hand and we can take you off mute to explain your question, if you don't want to type it out. But we do have a Q&A panel just at the top. And you can ask your question anonymously if you want as well. So if you do have any burning questions around AI in general, or Copilot or ChatGPT or anything that we're going to present today, just let us know. We do have Teams Live, so you can flick through some of the slides we're going to talk about. They are quite loose in terms of what you're going to look at and things like that. But feel free to ask questions moving ahead. Brilliant. Right, Sophie, should we get started?
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone's here.
Great. So thanks for joining, everyone. So my name is Peter Graham. I'm the Partner Development Manager at Ingram Microcloud, TV's distributor, working in all things modern workplace and licensing and artificial intelligence. If you have joined us on the previous 2 webinars, welcome back. If this is your first webinar that you're joining, please go back and look through the first 2 webinars, which we talk about what is Copilot, and the second one is how we can adopt it as well. Today's session, we're just going to cover off, ask us anything. Treat us as the experts. Any burning questions you have that haven't been covered, or any questions that you still have around artificial intelligence, or just Microsoft technologies in general. I'm joined today by Sophie. Sophie, do you want to give yourself a bit of an intro for those who don't know you?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sophie Cooper. I work at Tiva. I'm the adoption specialist here within the cloud team. I've had Copilot probably since it's been available for CSP customers. So I got it around February time. It's really helped me massively with everything that I'm doing. It is like my personal assistant, but I also see some of the flaws and some of the difficulties from an end user perspective as well. So here to answer any questions and help if I can.
Great, awesome. So we'll get started then. So we'll go on to the first of only a couple of slides. I said a couple, it's only 15, but in terms of some of the things that many businesses have been asking, and this is not just from a Tiva perspective, but just in general. If you're looking on forums, or if you're just speaking to other people in business, these are some of the things that people are generally asking. So if you do have any of these burning questions, we're going to cover these off now. So how are AI models being used already in the business? So this is something you need to think about within the business you work for right now. There's a lot of people out there, obviously, since the craze that, ChatGPT came out last March, and then Microsoft and then Google and AWS have all been going, oh, we've got an AI tool and we've got a chatbot and things like that. It's important to know that if anyone else in your organization is using AI, what are they using it for? Now, the biggest thing that I've noticed, and, Ingram is no stranger, I'm sure Tiva is no as well, A lot of people are using ChatGPT because it's typically, the free version. It's the one that everyone's talking about. It was the fastest adopted AI chatbot in the market in the last 12 months. It's, grew to over 100 million users in the space of under 3 months. And the thing about that you need to know about ChatGPT is it's created by OpenAI, which is quite a popular and well-known AI business. And regarding, how it is helping businesses at the minute, it's helping businesses get their answers faster. It's giving you the context much faster. Typically, one of the favorite business tools in the world is probably Google or Bing. Anytime you're looking for something, you go onto the web and you search for something. The important thing to know is that, these ChatGPT models that we'll talk about in a bit more detail later, harness all the context of the situation you're trying to get an answer to and bring you the result from multiple sources in an instant, rather than you having to physically research and go through multiple different sites to qualify, the source material. If it's relevant, it produces it all based on what it thinks. And that's important to do it. In terms of a large language model, the LLM tool, how do I choose a LLM tool? We'll talk about that in a bit more detail later, but typically a lot of businesses don't think about that, because at the moment, a lot of businesses are thinking about, what is that LLM tool got access to? That's typically, we were just talking about that just before we joined, Sophie. A lot of people are a bit worried about, what can an AI tool see within my business? How can I make sure that it's not seeing something it shouldn't? And we'll go into a bit more detail of how Copilot is restricted and things like that. But effectively, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think every customer that I've spoken to in and around Copilot, I mean, when it comes to the AI models, pretty much every customer has used within the business already using ChatGPT, if not Copilot, because everyone is going to go and access it either personally or through their work laptop. It's just easy, readily available there to use. So then we've got to think about, well, people are already using these AI models in the business. Do we want to advance to use Copilot? For LLM, I mean, again, any customers that have already adopted to Copilot, there is the concern of what Copilot does have access to, and that is a question I'm getting asked quite a lot.
Yeah, I use ChatGPT on my phone quite a bit. I don't use it on my work laptop, but I use it quite a lot on my personal phone. And the important thing to know about, ChatGPT, you can pay for ChatGPT, but like Copilot, as you can see, we're just moving on to the next topic of why should I pay for one. When you're paying for, certain elements of these, Claude is the example of that. You've got, Copilot, which has got Pro version as well. They typically have a faster response rate, the turbo mode, as they call it on ChatGPT. In terms of like that. So in terms of why some people would pay for one, is typically because they get faster results and it's easier to access the information. But if people are just using the free one, obviously it learns from the data that you're ingesting into it, these tools. So obviously that's how a large language model understands the context and gets better with age, like a fine wine. It learns from the insight that it's gaining the data that it's ingesting from you as a user. Now, the important thing, and we'll discuss that in a bit more detail, is Copilot does do the same thing, but in your organization as a bubble, as a kind of a containerized zone. Now, if you're using the free version of Copilot within Bing and you're not logged in with your company credentials, it will learn everything. It will absolutely ingest everything. Whereas if you're logged in with your Enter ID, we're all logged in Teams today with our business IDs, our email addresses. As long as we're logged into Copilot, it restricts the search to just your organization. It doesn't share anything with Microsoft. If you're using a personal email and you're not logged in to Bing as an example, it will learn everything. It will ingest everything. Same with ChatGPT and Claude and things like that. So that's some of the things you need to be aware of is, if people are using other ChatGPT tools within the organization, you don't have any control over that. You don't have any control over what they share or what they have got back as a response. You don't know what they're doing. And sometimes for a business, that's quite scary. Some businesses are thinking, oh, I've seen massive productivity levels recently. Maybe it's because I brought everyone back into the office, or maybe it's because this person just came back from a holiday. You don't know. And these are some of the things that we can talk about in a bit more detail later. This is my favorite question, this number 4 point here. So I'm going to direct this to you, actually. So AI is fairly new, is what people would say from a business perspective. AI has been around since the 50s, since Alan Turing, if you know that story. But a a lot of people think it still needs more development. Why should I care about AI right now in the business? Why has there been a button pushed in the last 12 months and everyone's gone crazy for AI? What would you say is your reason behind that, Sophie?
End users have gone absolutely crazy for it because it's a trend and it's so easy. It is a trend. It's
Yeah.
trending everywhere. Everywhere I look, everyone's talking about Copilot. When ChatGPT came out, it was either everyone was terrified of it or they absolutely loved it and it was their best friend. And I think it is kind of the same. Everyone's moving along their own model of Copilot, whether it is Claude, Gemini, all of these other elements that are coming out. But it's important because it's going to help your business, and because it's trending, everyone wants to use it. It's the best thing since sliced bread is what everyone's talking about. So it is going to get better though. That's the thing. I mean, it's Copilot is learning and Microsoft are changing things all the time, as they always do. So I can only see it getting better.
Yeah. I've kind of got an idea myself, and again, this is we're all opinionated here. I think it's kind of like, do you remember about 10, 15 years ago, everyone was buying small cars. All the biggest car makers were all making small cars because of the smart car. You had, the Igos, the Polos, they were very, very popular, and Mini was very popular and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, Nissan came out with the Nissan Juke. And that completely changed the car industry on its head. Everyone wanted SUVs or compact SUVs. But they still wanted them to be hatchbacks, but they wanted them, raised up, maybe just because the Americans had such big trucks and things like that.
Yeah.
And it switched on its head. And obviously, iPhones came out and they reinvented the touchscreen, and everyone wanted a touch phone. And Blackberries were like the biggest thing going back 20 years ago. And now all of a sudden, everyone's got touch phones. And it's always about making things more compact or smaller, or it's giving us access to data faster than ever before. And that's what I think AI is. We're kind of in a generation of people where we want things now. We don't want to wait for them. Gusto and, HelloFresh is a prime example of that. When COVID hit, people were having to queue in a line, 2 meters apart or whatever, to go and get all the ingredients to go and make their dinner at home and whatever. And because all the fast food takeaways were effectively closed. And it took ages to make a meal because some people were just so used to, ordering stuff all the time. And these big businesses like Gusto and HelloFresh and others made an absolute fortune because everyone was too lazy to think of a meal idea that night, which you could pre-order the exact ingredients that you needed, and it was like, oh, meal in 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, great, it's simple. It's simple. It simplified, the instructions of how I want to do it. I don't want to follow a Gordon Ramsay cookbook sort of thing. And I think AI is doing that same thing from a business perspective. Everyone's been working from home. Everyone's got that kind of monotonous task that they have to perform on a daily basis. Sometimes you find yourself working at home and you're thinking, oh, the dishes need doing over there. I've got 10 minutes between my next meeting, or I could go and do that. And then you feel that you're behind at work or something. Or you're in the office and people are always chatting to you all the time because they've not seen you in ages because you're remote working. And you're thinking, how can I get my work done faster so I have more time to do other things? And that's what AI is solving. AI is solving a challenge that was kind of in the back of everyone's heads, where it's like, you're all in this webinar today and you're thinking, what have I got after this webinar today? What else am I doing today? How can I speed up this process, the time to value to get a task done? And AI is kind of that thing that no one really thought of, that, oh, I can get something done faster, rather than having to go and research about it or create a document or create a response back to someone. And it's kind of there in the background. And, as a generational impact, everyone's like, oh, great, I can get all of my work done and have some time back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's adapted with the times, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely has, yeah. So, in terms of open discussions here, we've been quite open at the minute. I'm just going to jump into the Q&A. I think there's a couple of things in here already. And so we're just going to have a look. Oh, maybe not. No, nothing in there at the moment. No, right, cool, that's fine. But yeah, please think of any questions you've got, guys, in terms of anything you've got burning on the back of your mind right now. Again, raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and we'll continue
There are no
on.
stupid questions as well. I need
Yeah,
to
there is
push
nothing
that out
stupid.
there. I ask Pete stupid questions all the time, and though he doesn't say it to my face, he knows that they're sometimes a bit stupid. But no judgment.
Yeah.
Very open discussion here.
No, that's fine. Well, just a bit of insight to share at the moment is there's over 1,000 IT companies in the UK today, including Tiva, that are transacting Copilot to customers and businesses right now. And out of those customers and businesses, there's over 5,000 UK businesses transacting Copilot today, which is quite a stark figure. And that figure is growing every day. So if you're not one of the businesses that are adopting Copilot right now, just take on board, if you're not doing it right now, maybe your competitor is. And what do you think the advantage that gives your competition? Okay, so think of things like that at the moment. Now, the average purchase of a Copilot license, as an example, is about 5 or more. But a really stark, interesting figure that Microsoft shared was over 70% of businesses right now have adopted some sort of AI in the last 18 months. Now, that could be Copilot or it could be ChatGPT. And the funniest thing, over 50% of them are just by people using AI for their personal use and using in the business. Now, that was from a Microsoft Consumer Index, report, which I find quite interesting, where if you are not using AI in your business as a company, there's people in your organization who are already using it, which is quite interesting. And those figures in terms of, the amount of UK businesses using it at the moment is quite interesting.
So I've just got a question from Gary.
Yeah.
So how can we ensure that the development and deployment of artificial intelligence systems are aligned with ethical principles and do not perpetuate existing biases or create new ones?
Very good question, Gary. So yeah, so Microsoft has some AI rules. I would call it like the 8 rules of AI, if you want to call it that. Or sorry, 6 rules. Sorry, 6 rules of AI. And the important thing to know is that Microsoft Cognitive Services, which is AI, is closely aligned with OpenAI. Now, I'll go into a bit more detail around what OpenAI means to Microsoft. Microsoft invests in OpenAI. So a lot of a lot of the technology under the hood of Copilot is powered by OpenAI, but it's Microsoft's own instance of it. Okay, they've basically got access to the same kind of tools underneath it all. Now, the 6 areas of how you can ensure that AI is responsible, its ethical principles and biases and things like that, including if you create your own AI using Microsoft tools or OpenAI tools, is around this. So we've got fairness as one of the rules. So it treats everyone fairly, okay, without bias, in terms of whether that be ethnicity or anything like that. There's reliability and safety in terms of making sure that it safely responds to things. It's not going to turn around and say, oh, you should go and do this. If it's something that's going to break the law, as an example. It also looks at privacy and security. Now, that's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of businesses have not adopted artificial intelligence internally, which is the privacy and security. And rightly so. If you're saying, oh, AI, go and find something, it searches everything within an organization. And some people are like, oh, I don't want it to, get access to everything or share it to someone it shouldn't. And Microsoft does have some tools in place, which we'll talk about later. But it does ensure that, it only gives access from a Copilot standpoint. It only gives access to the information that you actually have, written permission for. And if you don't have the policy set up already, it will not let it will let them see it. But again, working with Tiva and your partners, you can ensure that the right policies are in place before you put AI into your organization. So I talked about in the last webinar about getting an assessment for Copilot, and we can look at those principles and things like that. The other thing that we're looking at as well is inclusiveness, ensuring that everyone is included, in terms of making sure that AI is not biased in terms of what it is, including. And I'm thinking standpoints from, maybe you've got a disability like dyslexia or something like that, or speech impairment or reading impairment or something like that. And there's different variations of communicating with AI, so it ensures that it's not alienating anyone out of the business. The other one is transparency. Now, this is one of the key features, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail later, about what differentiates Copilot, specifically the Microsoft instance of AI, amongst other AIs, is it provides the source material every time it gives you a response. Now, I know ChatGPT does on some occasions, depending on the context, but Microsoft Copilot, in every single response, it gives a footnote of a link of where did it get that statement or sentence? What website did it get it from? What document is it referencing? And it tells you where it got it from. And again, if you don't have access to it, you'll not get that response or that text. If you do have access to that document, it will tell you this is from a document in the SharePoint site that you've got access to, or this document is from your OneDrive folder. It'll tell you exactly where it got it from. So that, I think, is quite critical in terms of plagiarism and things like that. And then the last one is accountability. Now, this is my most favorite statement of the Microsoft laws of AI, because in terms of the accountability, it ensures that the people that create, the algorithms behind the LLMs are responsible for the outputs in terms of that, in terms of, if they're, using data that's unbiased, or they're using data that's not really relevant, or it's not categorized correctly, it should not be used, and they will be held accountable. But the funniest thing about this all, and I've not read into the laws of other ones, but Microsoft, you cannot hold Microsoft as a business accountable for the responses that AI gives as a response. Because it's generative AI, which I find hilarious. But in terms of the accountability, I'll double check on what you can hold accountable for, in terms of that. But they're the kind of 6 rules around ensuring that, Microsoft AI adheres to those 6 principles. Okay. Now, I don't know in terms of ChatGPT and other ones. I don't know if you know, Sophie, but that's the Microsoft in terms of response.
Yeah. And I think that actually kind of plays nicely into the next question, which is from Danella. So she said, my organisation has started to adopt Copilot, but are concerned about its usage and want to create guidance on using AI safely in terms of inputting the right data that is not confidential. Is there any guidance out there that you can recommend?
So absolutely a valid question. So in terms of creating guidance around AI safety, and funny story, some organizations I've seen who are adopting Copilot have asked Copilot to write an AI policy. I've seen this so many times, it's quite hilarious. But yes, some organizations are creating an AI policy that their team have to sign or adhere to if they want to use artificial intelligence within the business. There's nothing wrong with asking AI to create a policy. You can review it yourself and see what you like, you think to it. You might have not even thought about some of the things it's thought of in a scenario, but absolutely try it. Go into Bing right now and log in and ask it to create one. And every response will be different, of course, but definitely try that. In terms of the right data that it's accessing, that's why it's important and imperative that you have your tenant, your business assessed for Copilot adoption and Copilot viability. The reason being is Tiva and as a business can assess what policies have you got turned on in terms of data, what sites have got sensitive information within them. They could do a scan of your entire business and find there's credit card information in a document buried in a SharePoint site from 4 years ago. And Copilot could probably reference that to anyone who's got access to that SharePoint site, but no one's accessed that document in 2 years.
Yeah.
But you don't want Copilot to reference that. So again, having a data cleanse, having that assessment to see what kind of holes are in my organization's data, what kind of data is not got protection on it from a file level. And depending on the license, you can turn on policies that say, if a document contains this sensitive information, flag it up, let me know. Or if there's a SharePoint site that's got all the sensitive HR data in it, you can turn on restricted SharePoint, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail as well. But yeah, there's definitely the guidance effectively is have your tenant assessed for compliance and security. That is literally the number one thing, because you'll get a 27-page report that will say, here's an MOT of your business. Yep. Here's all the global admins. Here's all the SharePoint sites. Here's the amount of documents that contain sensitive information and where they're stored. Here's the policies that you don't have turned on that are recommended to turn on if you're going to put Copilot into your organization. And in terms of, here's the data that's over 5 years old. You should maybe archive this because it's not relevant anymore. So I'd say get an MOT, effectively get an assessment on your organization, because you can absolutely go out and buy Copilot right now, but you may uncover things that you might not know existed in your organization. So it's important to have your tenant assessed. That would be my outright guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is what we're recommending as the first step anyway to adopting to Copilot. Obviously, as Pete said, you don't want your users to have access to Copilot and then off the back of that access to a lot of documents that they shouldn't have access to, which we are finding with a lot of companies at the minute anyway. Yeah. They've kind of jumped on, got a few Copilot license, oops, didn't realise I had access to this because I've inherited someone else's permissions, or it happens quite a lot. And just off the back of that as well, I kind of wanted to put to the table, a lot of companies are going ahead and buying like 1 or 2 Copilot licenses. Do you think that's the right thing to do? Or are we recommending that we buy every single person in the business a Copilot license, or is there a happy medium?
It's one extreme to the other extreme. There's definitely a happy medium in that. So the problem that I've seen from businesses buying 1 or 2 licenses is those businesses are going, oh, I want my IT admin to have Copilot so they can play around with it and see how good it is. Yeah. But that means your IT admin, can see everything in the business, if you haven't had this assessment or this policy turned on. But the problem with licensing an IT administrator or somebody or the director or the owner of the business is you will do and use Copilot differently to somebody who will actually benefit from a productivity standpoint. A director of the business will perform daily tasks differently to someone in sales or someone in finance or someone in HR. And so you're not actually getting a range of where can Copilot make an impact on my business. You're actually, you're just testing it out based on what you think, I don't want to say the word, but selfish in terms of, if you're that person in the organization who's the only person that's got it, why? Why has nobody else got it? Is it because you're more qualified to get Copilot than other people? Or is it just because you want to play with it because you're in charge of the budget? I don't know. But those companies are not adopting Copilot in the same way that others are successfully adopting Copilot. Now, the other end of the spectrum is no, you do not need to license everyone with Copilot. Maybe in a couple of years' time, but the important thing is you need to get an understanding of what is the impact that AI can have on my business. Will it make more of an impact in finance department or more of an impact in the sales department? And you need to gradually roll it out. Now, the recommendation that Microsoft has is license 10% of your organization. That's kind of loose figure. My recommendation is license 1 person per department, typically 5 users. Most companies don't have more than 5 departments, have a minimum of 5 departments, depending on the size. And you effectively bring those 5 individuals together. They all perform different tasks because they're all in different departments, and you get them to share their best practices around what they're using Copilot for. And then you get to understand how many hours or how many meetings or minutes you're saving or things like that around where Copilot has saved them time. Because ultimately, we're not buying Copilot just for the sake of, because every other organization is. We're buying Copilot because we think it will make a difference in our organization. Will save us time. It'll save us money. Help us do more with less, as the Microsoft scenario goes. And that's why everyone's using generative AI at the moment.
Yeah, it's easy. I've actually got a question from Moz asking if there's any metrics or case studies that demonstrate Copilot's impact. And I'm wondering actually if there were any from the previous presentation or webinar that we did, where I actually didn't attend.
We talked about Viva Insights. So if you type in Viva Insights Copilot into Bing, there is other search engines available. If you type in Viva Insights Copilot, there's actually a dashboard that you can install for managers or for IT administrators that allows you to see the impact of users licensed with Copilot. Now, I will say there's a prerequisite to this here. You need at least 10 licenses of Copilot to see a lot of detail, but also you need a Viva Insights license to see very, very high level or very in-depth detail. Now, if you don't have the Viva Insights license and you have less than 10 users, you can still see a high-level overview of most people are using Copilot in Word, in Outlook or SharePoint or whatever. But once you get over 10 users and you buy a Viva Insights license, which is less than £4 a user, you can actually see this individual or this department has saved an hour today, an hour by using Copilot. How many drafts of an email has Copilot done for this user or this department? You can actually see in detail the metrics of the adoption and how you can demonstrate the ROI on it. Now, in terms of the figures, the facts and figures, Microsoft has a lot of them on their website. If you go to adoption.microsoft.com or you go to customers.microsoft.com to see what the adoption looks like from that standpoint as well.
Yeah. I was going to say there's a very fancy little slide that says something about, is it 10% or an hour of your day saved? Something along those lines.
There's one that says that, you know, if someone's on an average of $70,000 a year in America, obviously it's American facts and figures at the moment, if they save around an hour and a half a month, Copilot has already returned its investment to you.
Yeah.
As an example, I think from a UK standpoint, where from what we've seen at the minute, I think it's if you're on a £35,000 a year salary, Copilot saves you 2 hours a month, you've made your money back.
Yeah.
And from what I'm seeing at the minute, from most businesses that have adopted Copilot, they're saving 2 hours a week per user. Which is quite, yeah.
Muz has asked a couple of questions. So one of the questions is, what are the limitations or challenges of using Copilot? And I think it goes with any new product. There is going to be limitations and challenges with everything. Actually, real world using it, I think it depends on how you work. So obviously, everyone will use Copilot differently. Everyone will work with it differently. For myself, I use it a lot in Teams and Outlook, and it's worked amazing for me in there. I do have to say, in PowerPoint, it could be better. Some of the images that it's generating don't really match the content that I'm asking for. In Excel, there's a separate issue there that it's actually quite limited in the capabilities that it has with manipulating the data in Excel, but Microsoft have resolved that by bringing out Copilot for Excel. And is that, I'm not 100% if that's actually out yet, or if
it's kind of out. It's out in public preview, but it's still going through teething. So I actually had a customer of Tiva recently that has joined some of the webinars, and they're finding it troublesome to get data from an Excel spreadsheet within SharePoint, and Copilot can't find it. And now the important thing to note here is that if you've just created a random, you know, spreadsheet and you've populated data, you need to convert it into a table. All right. In terms of, you know, again, we're not all going to be Excel wizards. There might be a couple on this call. We need to convert it into a table for it to understand the data. And, you know, the Microsoft adoption website, adoption.microsoft.com, if you go into Copilot and you click on Excel, it will show you some of the kind of golden nuggets of what you need to do within the application to get the best value of the data. But we talked about on the last webinar, the art of the prompt. The longer the prompt, the more detail you give in the prompt, the better the output, and it will actually find what you're looking for. So if you say to Copilot, I want you to look in this SharePoint site for a file containing this type of information, it should find it. But again, the more you use it, the better it will be at finding things.
Yeah, absolutely. But definitely the more you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Absolutely.
Final question from Buzz. What are the key features of Copilot that differentiate it from the usual ChatGPT?
Well, that's quite an interesting one. I'm going to jump between some of the slides in this deck, actually, because it's quite an interesting one, that one. But Sophie, what do you know? I know a couple of things, but what do you know so far about it?
I was going to say, obviously, it's the fact that it sits in your workspace. It has access to your information, your files. It learns about how you speak to your customers, how you speak to your colleagues. And that is the game changer for me in the way that it differentiates us from Copilot, from ChatGPT. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts.
I'll give two opinions. I'll give the corporate response and I'll give the opinionated response based on facts. The corporate response from Microsoft is it's built within your tenant. It's your own version of generative AI. So again, if you're logged in with your Entra ID, it doesn't share anything with Microsoft. It's your own containerized version. So anything you ask it, it learns from the data, but it doesn't share any of the data with Microsoft unless you click the feedback button, okay, and say, oh, I want to give feedback on AI, right? So that's the important thing, the enterprise data protection. If you're using another form of AI like Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, well, not so much Gemini, I'm not sure, but definitely ChatGPT and Claude, it learns from any of the data or input that you put into it. If you share a file, if you share an image, if you share a bit of text, it will learn from it and it will use that to make the AI systems better for those versions. That's the corporate response from Microsoft. The factual response is that thing I was telling you about earlier was the sources piece. So in terms of, ChatGPT is probably easier to use, maybe a nicer interface. Out of them all, Claude has got the most user-friendly interface to interact with. But the key advantage of Copilot over another generative AI is that source material piece. That piece where it gives you the footnote of where did it find the information from to give you the response from. Did it find it in the web? If so, what website? And what phrase or text did it take from that website? If it's not using the web, where exactly in your tenant did it find this information? Is it in a SharePoint site? Is it in your OneDrive? And I think that's the kind of biggest difference around the fact that ChatGPT can only use the internet, which is fine. Copilot can do both. It can search the web and it can search your tenancy privately. But it gives you the context of where it found the information from. I think that is the most important thing. That is the game changer of Copilot, in my own personal opinion, is that if somebody asks you for context on something, you can say, well, actually, it's because it's from here. It's sourced from here.
Yeah, I found that really useful. I mean, when I was coming, I had a couple of weeks off at the start of the year, and when I was coming back from that, I had a lot of emails. Not all of them were completely relevant to what I was doing. Some of them I was just CC'd in them. Some of them were just for attention, but not actually to be responded to. But a lot of them were kind of reply on reply on reply, and it was just like an endless thread. And getting Copilot to summarize those and then being able to reference it and be able to go back to what was actually said. Game changer, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess hands up, if virtual hands, of course, can't see us all. Virtual hand, if you're using Gemini or Claude, because they're not really as popular as the others, but just a virtual hand if you're using Gemini or Claude, either personally or in the organization. One.
I've got one.
Okay, right, you can put your hand down again. Hands up, who's using ChatGPT? Only ChatGPT. Okay, 3, 6, a few more, yeah, 4, maybe, yeah, 5. Interesting. And then you can put your hands down. And then how many of you are using Copilot? Now that's the paid for version or the free version. That's using Bing, or you're paying for a license for M365 Copilot. A lot more.
Wow,
11, 12. That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. Yeah. So you can see here amongst the 5,000 businesses, there's about 12 of you here in the that are using it, which is quite cool. Right. I know there's a couple other questions. I'm conscious of time, and there's a couple of things I want to talk about as well, which is quite interesting. But just for 1 second, I'm going to share this slide, which I think is quite a powerful slide. You may have seen this already by flicking through. But Microsoft, you know what Microsoft's like in terms of its naming conventions. They don't make everything simple. Like yesterday, Sophie, when we were talking about Defender licensing for servers, and there's like 6 different options, we're trying to figure out which one was best suited for the customer. That was quite funny. But did you know there's over 20 versions of Copilot already in either in development or available right now? It's quite a stark, number of products that Microsoft is launching now. The biggest one that everyone's talking about is Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is built for the modern work side of things. Very bottom of this chart here, which is built into the apps that we know and love today. But there's already versions of Copilot built within LinkedIn, Azure, Sales for business applications. You got Copilot for Fabric or Power Platform, GitHub Copilot, Windows 11 Copilot. So if any of you guys are Windows using 11 right now, it'll either be beside your search bar right now in the taskbar, or it'll be right in the far right-hand corner. And there's Copilot for security. What else? There's Copilot built into the Edge platform as well, and various other ones. There's quite a lot. So you can understand there in terms of when someone talks about Copilot, it's not going to be a specific one that they're talking about. And as I said, there's so many different variations. It would be good to understand, again, if you want to drop it into the chat or raise your hand, if you're using other Copilots within your organization. So again, raise your hand if you're using other Copilots other than Microsoft 365, if you're using Sales, Fabric, Security, if you're using the Windows 11 one in your search bar, things like that. Because each one will perform a different task within your organization. I'm going to assume no. Okay. Well, food for thought in case you're talking about it anyway, but it's quite an interesting one, that. Cool. Right. The next thing I just wanted to kind of touch on here, let's see, is this one. Because we want to kind of point out in terms of where does AI, where is your business on its AI journey? Because this is quite a common thing that people keep asking about as well, and maybe there's a question about it later. But where are you in your artificial intelligence journey? Now, AI, as I said, has been around since the 50s, and it's quite important to talk about, where does Copilot sit? Where does ChatGPT sit, and Gemini and Claude? Where do they sit within an organization's usage? And I just want to point out this really useful slide from Microsoft, which is the business value in terms of you don't need instructions effectively to use it, and it's role based. So you've got obviously Copilot down here in the bottom left hand side of this chart here. It's responsive. It's based on the ChatGPT platform, or DALL-E for anyone who's using it for image creation. And you've got your Copilot extensions, which we'll talk about later. That's typically where you kind of sit in terms of where most organizations are using generative AI. And then you've got in terms of the effort required to maintain it, and where it becomes more bespoke and more technical, which is Copilot Studio, where you can connect artificial intelligence into other applications that are not Microsoft. So in terms of generative AI working with Salesforce and Adobe and Spotify and various other things, you can create connectors that say, hey, Copilot, I want you to source an answer or material from this other SaaS app in my organization. I want you to get information, from Adobe, or I want you to get information from Salesforce, or anywhere else in the business where you're using another application that sits outside of Microsoft. You can use that for your responses. And then obviously you've got Visual Studio in terms of the extensions and things like that, and then whatnot. And then you've got AI Studio within Azure, where you can build your own artificial intelligence within Microsoft. And that's where you would start to have AI engineers within your business. Now, obviously that's probably for your business 5 or 10 years away still, but just bear in mind that Microsoft is currently seeing a massive influx of jobs within the artificial intelligence space. So if you've not got a dedicated person within your organization now that's surrounded by or is it employed to do artificial intelligence tasks, you probably will do in the next 5 years, which is quite important to see. Sophie, should we drop back down to some more questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I've got a follow-up here from Danella. So follow-on question from the assessment. How will Copilot know when a document or folder is confidential? Will the search be as good as the organization's ability to file documents properly? Essentially asking do individuals need to mark the document as sensitive or confidential? So are we labeling these documents in order for Copilot to recognize?
Yeah, so you'll not know immediately. So when you do that search, it will typically look for the most common reasons of sensitive information, which is employee ID numbers, passport numbers, driving license numbers, credit card information, bank account details, that type of thing. It's looking for that type of sensitive information. It will not pull apart any sensitive project names or anything like that, but you can do that separately. So once the assessment is pulled apart, the common areas of personal identifiable information, you can work with Tiva or your partner to go through, right, I want to find, you can do an audit. I want to find any files or folders or text that contains this name or project. And you can typically go through it like that in that type of detail or context. But what you can do is, if you have a business premium license or a Microsoft 365 E3 or Microsoft 365 E5 license, you can put on information protection within your organization. And you can say, I want any document that contains this word or phrase to be labeled as confidential. And then any future documents, your team, your users can manually assign labels to documents to say, this is confidential in internal only. This is highly confidential only for these users. Or this is just, normal. This is for anyone in the organization and you can share externally because there's nothing sensitive in it. And you can manually label those independently. Now, if you're a bit skeptical about, people not labeling things correctly or changing a label, you can set up a requirement that if someone changes a label, that either the owner of the document or the IT administrator gets notified. Oh, Sophie Cooper's changed this document from highly confidential to normal. And then you can ask her for a justification, and it will let you change the document. Or it will say, I want to change this label. It needs to be approved. But if you're still a bit unsure about giving people that kind of, authority to change permissions of, whether a document is sensitive or not, you can purchase information on governance, which is around about a £5 or £6 add-on for each individual user. And it can automatically, again, using the phrase AI, to instinctively go, well, this document contains a word or phrase that other people have labeled confidential on documents. I'm going to label this document confidential. And it will automatically apply labels to every document that's created in the organization based on what you think, or what you're telling it is classed as is organizational or sensitive. So there's some of the things you can do in terms of making sure that they're confidential. But a very quick way of doing it is that SharePoint restricted search. That is kind of a very blanket, anything in the SharePoint, Copilot cannot reference. You cannot search in this SharePoint site for anything. So if you've got a dedicated SharePoint site that's got highly sensitive information, finance, people's payrolls, all that kind of stuff, investigations, whatever it may be, you can say, hey, Copilot, this SharePoint site doesn't exist to you. So if somebody tries to search for something, even if they have access to it, Copilot will not return a result. That's a very blanket approach, so that you can get AI faster into the organization if you want. Or you can just go, right, for the meantime, while we sort out this environment, we'll put Copilot in, but Copilot can't see anything in the SharePoint site until we file through everything and decide what we're archiving and how we're going to label this document. So that's a very strict way of doing it quite quickly.
Kind of brings us on to our next question from Stephen. So say if I ask Copilot to produce a report, can it provide a list of documents from our SharePoint that it references?
So you want it to produce a report, can it provide a list of documents from a SharePoint that it references? It absolutely can, but you would have to give it a long prompt of what exactly you're looking for. So what we were talking about in the last one is the art of the prompt. There's kind of four frameworks, or sorry, 4 pillars you need to think of. It's the GCSE framework. The goal in mind, the source material, the expectation off the back of it, and I can't even remember the fourth one now. The context. So give it a goal in mind of what you're looking for. I'm looking to collate a list of documents for an upcoming sales meeting. I want you to look in this SharePoint for these phrases or text. I want you to list in a column what phrase was found in the document. And in the second column, I want you to tell me what the document title is. And in the third column, I want you to tell me, where did you find that document? It should be able to source that type of information. Okay. If not, we can look at that separately, but you need to give it the context in which you want to find things. Now, again, if SharePoint restrictions you turn on, it will not search, it will not find anything in that SharePoint. If you're very bland, it's a blanket approach, there's almost too much information for it to go through. It will sometimes return and say, I can't find anything. So you need to give it very clear, very descriptive instructions. Almost treat it like you're bringing an apprentice into your organization and you're giving them an instruction. It's a first day and you're working in your office and you're giving them a very bespoke instruction of where to go and find something and what you're looking for and how do you want it presented back to you. But it absolutely can reference different things like that.
Yeah, I have definitely found the more in-depth. So sometimes I will make my prompt longer than I think I could have probably written this myself. But the more I write into the prompt, definitely 100%, the more that I get out of that. So next question actually from Muzz is about the summarising of emails or Teams conversations. So I find it okay for summarising emails or Teams conversations, but overall for drafting emails, I find ChatGPT more intuitive and perhaps better. Is there anything I should be doing differently for better utilisation?
Yeah, I would say it's well, you go first, so because you're using it day to day.
Yeah, to be honest, I was going to say for me, it is, again, comes back to the prompts, what you're putting into the context to get that content out. But then also it is learning who you are. So I guess it depends how long you've had the Copilot license. I find mine to be a lot more intuitive now than when I first got it at the end of Jan. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. ChatGPT is typically, because it's sourcing, how other people are asking similar questions globally in terms of, how they're using it. It will typically source different and better in certain circumstances, better responses, because there's a lot more data that ChatGPT can gather across the entire world of what people are asking it. There's a lot more data that ChatGPT can actually utilize to create the response versus your version of Copilot is based on how many people in your organization are asking it a similar question, and how it can prompt. So again, going back to Sophie's statement, the more you're using it, the more people that are using it within your organization. And like I know colleagues of mine who are saying, draft a response, sound like me. So typically when you get a response from AI, it will say, you're asking it to respond to somebody, it'll say, hi, thanks for contacting yada, 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 whatever. But if I say, sound like me, it'll say, hi, everybody, or hey, or what's up, or something, whatever the most commonly used phrase is that I use to start an email response. If you say sound like me, the more it ingests, the more data it's looking back historically, it will start to context them better. But again, going back to Sophie's point is, as much as you probably in some cases could have responded to the email by the time you've written your prompt, the bigger the prompt, the better the output. I'm afraid is literally the key thing that not everyone is doing when it comes to speaking with generative AI. I'll give you a prime example of what I mean by that. We've all probably got an Amazon Alexa, say it quite quietly, in our household, or we've got another form of a voice assistant within our home, and we give it very bland, straight responses. What's the weather today? What's the score in the England match? Tell me a joke or whatever. And it's very strict, very straightforward. Play Radio 1, whatever. And it's very strict in terms of what you're doing it. But if you went to ask it, a big, long question, it will not get it. Whereas the generative AIs for business that most people are using, and ChatGPT and stuff like that, are very much built on the platform of there's so much more data and information it can collect. And it very much requires as much context as possible to give you the valued output that you need. So in the terms of, ChatGPT has got access to a lot more web data and a lot more in terms of people have been asking probably similar questions. Can you draft a response to this email? Can you draft a response to this email? Think about the over 100 million people are using it globally. It's got a lot more data to contextualize to give you a response, and people have fed back. But your version of Copilot within your organization, depending on the size of your organization, depending on how much data it can look back in terms of responses that you've given and replies to emails, it will be a lot less than 100 million. So that's what you need to think about in terms of the more you use it, the more data, the longer your organization has been trading for, there's a lot more data for it to go off. All right. But again, a great website you can go on to is adoption.microsoft.com, or go into Copilot Labs, where you can get bespoke prompt templates as well around how to respond and how to speak to AI and what other people are using.
Yeah, I absolutely live on that adoption.microsoft website. It's brilliant. It's got everything you need. And if there's something you can't find, obviously you can drop us a message and we can probably find it for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's it on the questions. Obviously, if anyone's got any more, we've got a couple of minutes if you want to pop those in.
Pop some more in. Yeah, definitely. One thing I'm going to touch on now is Cloud Apps Discovery. Now, this is quite important because we did get a few questions on it last time. And I just want to point this out. If you've got a business premium license within your business, or an M365 E3 or E5, you can actually see if people in your organization are using AI technologies today. If you don't have Copilot in your organization, or you're using Copilot, but you don't know if other people in your organization are using their work PC to access the ChatGPT website or Claude or whatever else, you can find out using this application. Speak with Eva, and they can go through the report and generate it for you if you want. But this will allow you to view how much time people are spending on certain websites, regarding generative AI. It will even tell you, which users they are if you want, and you can even monitor, block, or restrict them. Now, I've popped in a link into this in this file here. You should all be able to click on that link on the bottom of this slide, because it's an interactive team SharePoint. So if you click on that link here, it should take you to the Microsoft website where they talk about how to use Cloud App Discovery to figure out if people are using generative AI in your organization. And you can start to look at, I don't want people to use ChatGPT because, they might be saying sharing business data with it. So you can obviously restrict their access to it and say your organization has blocked access to this website because of this reason. So you can stop them from sharing company data if you're nervous about that, and other ones. And then you can also speak with Tiva to say that if anyone's using Bing or ChatGPT, Bing or Copilot, they have to be logged in with their Entra ID, so that it's not sharing business information with Microsoft. Whereas if they are logged in, it's not sharing anything. So that's something that a lot of people are a bit nervous about in terms of, that's all great, but how do I control if people are using generative AI already in my business and I haven't got an AI policy set up, or I can't control what they're sharing, or I don't know what they're sharing. And this is how you can do it today. So it's quite important that. Okay, last thing before we go is customer feedback and stories. So Sophie, do you want to go through a couple of examples of where some Tiva customers already have either, any learnings that they've had or any benefits or things that they've seen by using Copilot that you've done so far?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it comes back to the prompts again for one of them. So I've had a customer having some of the similar issues that we've seen in the Q&A, obviously not getting the best responses. The Copilot's still learning. It's not giving like what you would expect Copilot to give. But we've gone to a promptathon at Microsoft, which was really interesting. We went through all the different prompts that we can do. We've got PDFs of different prompts that are best used, and how to communicate with Copilot. And after following those and giving Copilot some time, we've seen some real improvements with some of the content that's coming out of Copilot. Again, I think looking at access, so a lot of customers have had, one in particular we found had some issues around restricted access. So access, they've already rolled out Copilot, and found that there were some issues with some users having access to things that they weren't necessarily meant to have access to. But we've gone ahead and done the readiness assessment with Ingram, found some of the areas that they were missing, gone through the SharePoint and rectified some of those permissions as well. So I think a similar kind of theme going along with a lot of customers I've seen, obviously with the access requirements, the content that we're getting out of Copilot, some of the restrictions in applications like Excel that we've seen, but there is definitely movement on all of these. With Microsoft bringing out the prompts, bringing out Microsoft for Excel, Copilot for Excel. There's always going to be room for improvement, and Microsoft are always working to make Copilot better. So those are quite easily fixable.
Yeah, awesome. I see that Gerald still got his hand up. Gerald, I'm going to take you off mute if you want to take your mic off, if you're wanting to speak, to give a much bigger question if you want. Otherwise, you can lower your hand. Yeah, that's fine, no problem.
Yeah,
okay,
sorry
cool.
about that.
That's all right, don't worry. And I can see there's another question here from Carl. Is there a way to ensure repetitive context, such as the context you use over and over again, to make it respond like you, so it can be quickly added to the question? Off the top of my head, no, I don't think so. I would dare say that there'll probably be an element of, you could probably speak to Copilot in the future in terms of, how you interact with it. But at the moment, I would dare say no, there's no faster way to say sound like me every time you respond. Unless you teach it to say, every time I interact with you, Copilot, I want you to sound like me in drafting up emails, and see what it says back to that. That could be something you could try. But no, unfortunately, the deal is in, what you type to it. So try and give it as much context as much as possible. It might add a bit, like an extra 10 seconds to the prompt, but unfortunately, I don't think there's any other way that we can speed up in terms of the delivery of your prompt. Cool. I think that's it in terms of questions. So I think we're all good. Again, feel free to flick through any of the slides if there's any other questions you may have on a slide we haven't presented. I've just got a couple of slides up here in terms of other Microsoft customers directly around what they've seen. What I find is quite interesting is this IT company Atos has seen a 12% saving in terms of the time spent to resolve a case of where they're using Copilot. And 26% have said that they've had a massive increase on speed when it comes to performing tasks, which I think is quite important. But the key takeaway in terms of if you're using generative AI is understand if people are using it, if you want to control it, monitor it, or restrict it. And if you are using Copilot, the deal is in the prompt. And if you do need any additional experience around using generative AI, especially Copilot, you can reach out to Sophie, who's the adoption specialist. And if there's anything that you're a bit unsure about, please reach out to Tiva, because they can support you for anything. And again, no question is a silly question.
Absolutely.
Tiva's adopting AI, Ingram's adopting AI, many businesses around the UK are adopting it, and we're all in this boat together, so to speak. But yeah, hopefully you find today's session quite useful, and you've got your, the questions that you've wanted answered. If you've still got further questions, you can reach out to Sophie or myself on LinkedIn. Yeah, Sophie, is there anything else to add?
No, nothing else from me. Again, just echoing what Peter said. If you've got any issues or any queries around Copilot, please just reach out, either Teams, email, LinkedIn, whichever you prefer. And obviously, again, we are in the same boat. I'm still on my adoption journey with Copilot, so it's definitely interesting to hear from everyone else that's going through the same motions. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending. It's been really insightful.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, leave your feedback. Thanks, Umar. If you really enjoyed the session, or if you want to see this again, please, drop it into the chat, into the comments or whatever. We'd love to get your feedback if you find this useful. I think this Ask Us Anything kind of material of us just generally chatting, we didn't know if it was going to be like a podcast, if that was going to be quite useful, or do people love death by PowerPoint webinars, in terms of that sort of thing. So it'd be great to get your feedback to see if you want us to do more of this or continue. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Lee. Very useful. I'll open a GoFundMe so you can give me a donation if you want.
Brilliant.
All right, Brill. Well, yeah, thanks for your time, everyone, today, and we'll catch you later.
Yeah, absolutely. See you later.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.